Hello, everybody. My name is George Larrimore, and the show is Vietnam 360. We're glad to have you here. It's been 50 years since the high point, so to speak, of the Vietnam War. It was a controversial war, a long war, a war that dragged on and caused a lot of Americans a lot of anxiety and a lot of pain and a lot of political difficulty. It was hard to talk about at the time, but we feel like it's time for Vietnam veterans to have a chance to talk about their experiences with the war. That's what this show is about. We will, over the course of a period of time, have a number of Vietnam veterans in the show to talk about their experiences before and during and after the war. And our first guest today is Cecil Brunson, who was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam in 1972-1973. And with us also is Diane Height, who's the founder of Forever Young Senior Veteran Services here in the Mid-South. And my first question is for you, Diane. You began by helping World War II and Korean War veterans and basically doing things for them that they couldn't do for themselves. Now you are transitioning to where Vietnam veterans are a big part of what you do. Yes. Tell us about that. Tell us why that is happening now.
Well, of course, Forever Young, we honor World War II, Korean, Vietnam veterans. But like you mentioned, our World War II veterans are getting quite elderly, and we will continue to honor them as long as they're on this earth. However, we are transitioning right now to more toward our Korea and our Vietnam veterans. So we do want to make Forever Young a big part in their lives. We want to bring honor and healing and hope into their lives. And it's a long time coming for them, and they deserve it. And it really excites me to be able to give back to them because they have suffered and they have continued to suffer for many, many years. And so I want to take the opportunity now to really make a difference in their lives.
I want to ask both of you. I've spoken with a number of Vietnam veterans, obviously, over the years. I'm a Vietnam veteran myself, but over the years since my time there. And I'm finding now, as we're trying to do this show, that a number of Vietnam veterans, I'd say the majority of Vietnam veterans that I've spoken with, don't necessarily want to talk about it. Is it your experience? And I know that Vietnam veterans come up and talk to you about what happened with you, and then by doing that, I suspect they talk about themselves. What's your experience with Vietnam veterans?
I think that is the truth. I think that most of the guys are hesitant to talk about it because of when they came home from Vietnam, it wasn't to a loving country, and it's been hard for them to talk about it because of that. I think that they've kind of just held in. And I think it's healthier if they can talk about it, in veterans groups, or I have an opportunity to speak to groups around the city and across the country, and it's good when you can talk to people about it and make them understand that, a lot of us didn't go there because we were volunteers. A lot of the guys out there went because they were drafted, and they served their country just the same. So it's important that we give honor to these guys for what they did. I think every guy and girl who went to Vietnam was a hero because of what they did, how they served their country.
I've been to a lot of veterans groups, again, talking to people, asking them if they'd come on the show and talk to the people in the Mid-South. And it struck me over the course of several of these meetings at the Vet Center, for example, your guys wear their hats that say Vietnam veteran. There's a tremendous amount of pride. And I don't think people who are not Vietnam veterans necessarily think that we would feel that way. But there's a lot of pride among Vietnam veterans for what they did. It was controversial. It was, in some ways, an unclear mission that we were on. But yet, those guys are proud of what they did for each other.
That's true. And I think what you see there's a camaraderie. These guys who served together, they went to Vietnam together, they were in the trenches together, guys that I flew with, mission after mission. A lot of respect for these guys, and I think that it's important that they have that time where they can speak to each other and have that camaraderie together.
Diane, you mentioned, and I guess that the term just struck me. I think what you were saying was that you are now bridging between the veterans of that era and the Vietnam veterans. But you said something to me about how they connect with each other because of their each having similar experiences.
It doesn't matter where they fought, when they fought. When you have bullets flying at your head, they're brothers.
Amen.
And so they can sit and talk. We have a monthly meeting at Germantown Baptist Church, and we had a major that came that had fought in Afghanistan. And he sat down, and I'm not kidding, they talked for hours and hours. After our meeting, we had an Omaha Beach D-Day vet, and then we had this major from Afghanistan, and they were just like this. I mean, they were brothers. They had the same experiences, but many years apart.
I think we have to remind ourselves that there are generations now of veterans yet to come to organizations like yours 20 years from now, after you're not active anymore, that someone else is taking
Yes.
over the reins. There will be those veterans of Iraq and Iran and
Yes.
Afghanistan who will form their organizations again because of that brotherhood, and there'll be a lot of women involved this time.
That's right.
So, yeah. All right, if you don't mind, I ask you to kind of relive things a little bit for me. When did you first decide that you wanted to fly?
It was in college. I had, I'd seen a lot of the movies, and everything. I think all of us as kids, have that desire to fly when you see the heroes flying all these jets and what they do. It looked really interesting, and it looked like a lot of fun, to tell you the truth. I think all of us have a little kid in us that wants to fly in a fighter, and some of the movies, the Top Gun movies and stuff like that came out. I think a lot of people probably joined the Navy because of Top Gun movies.
Yeah.
But I looked at it and I thought, that would be a great way to spend my life flying.
But there had already, by this point, you graduated college, I guess, 1970?
70.
There were a lot of people that had already been taken prisoner by then. A lot of guys had been shot down by then. Did you have, what were your concerns like at the time as you're about to take this step?
You never think it's going to happen to you. It's always going to be somebody else. I don't think any of us went out to combat thinking, I'm going to get shot down today. You just don't do that. You go out there and you do your best, you fight your best. And generally, if you do your best and just remember your training and do everything you've been taught to do, you're going to survive.
Yeah.
And I think that's what most of us went into combat, thinking it's going to be the other guy in combat that dies, not me.
It'd be very hard to get people to do it unless they
Exactly.
could see it that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned something. I was at your meeting the other day, and correct me where I go wrong here, but your brother, I believe you said, was in the Air Force Academy?
Yes.
And so your concerns were about him. Tell us what you were feeling and thinking at the time, because you're watching the television war. So you know what's going on over there, and you know what your brother's about to get into.
Well, he went to the Air Force Academy during the Vietnam War, and he was going to pilot training, and we knew that soon as he graduated, he was going to be over in Vietnam. And we were, as a family, very fearful. And, we prayed every day that the war would end because we were so afraid that he would end up over there. So when I meet someone like Cecil, who's been through what he's been through, it really means a lot to me because I lived that. Even though I was a lot younger than my brother, even as a child, I remember like when the POWs came home. Time stood still for me. I will never forget that. It's like remembering where you were when JFK died. I will never forget when the POWs came home from Vietnam. And I remember sitting in our living room crying. We were so thankful that the war was over and that our boys were coming home.
Tell us about the first time that you flew a mission over North Vietnam. What is that sensation like when you've trained for something, you've thought about it, you think you're ready for it, you're as prepared as you can be, and then?
My first mission, you never forget the first time you've been shot at. and it was a milk run. It was just a simple mission to the Barrel Roll region of Laos, and our target was a suspected ammo dump on top of a mountain. So we took a 4-ship of F-4s loaded down with bombs and got in the target area, and I was number 3 in the formation, and number 1 rolled in on the target, and number 2 rolled in. About that time, the gunners woke up on the ground, and all of a sudden, AAA started just everywhere erupting. And as we're going down the chute, and we're jinking down the chute, dropped our bombs and pulled off, and I looked back, and the mountaintop was just erupting in flames, secondary explosions, and I can remember that, boy, I was just shaking like a leaf. Mouth was dry, I couldn't speak, and you know, when I realized they were shooting at Cease Brunson, boy, I tell you, this war took them on a whole new spectrum. But yeah, it's fearful. You know, the first time you go into combat and get shot at, it's memorable for you. But you have to understand that, you know, you're not going to die just because you went on a combat mission. You go out there with the best training of any military person in the world, and you do your best. And if you do your best and do everything you've been trained to do, I'd say there's a 99% chance you're going to make it back.
But that 1% gets awfully
well,
big.
It gets really big at that
Yeah.
point. That's right.
Tell me, what was your, or tell our audience what your job was inside this tiny cockpit in this big plane.
Well, I was flying an F-4. I was in the back seat, weapons system operator, and I operated all the bombing systems, radar, the radios, the navigation system, the inertial nav system. I was another set of eyes over Vietnam mostly, because when we got into close combat with MiGs or looking for SAMs, you know, we had the radar homing and warning gear in the F-4, which put tones in our headsets that said that the radars were looking at you, the GCI or the AAA or the SAM sites. And when something would come up, we'd get an indication of approximately where it was. We were a set of eyes at that point to pick up the SAMs or the AAA or the MiGs and direct as much we could the pilot up front to engage.
If you would, tell us about the day that you were shot down. And that was October
12th, 72.
Okay. Tell us about the day that you were shot down. We were talking about it before we started today, and you gave me a little bit of a description of it. But ordinary day, routine day?
Well, it was probably my 60th mission up over North Vietnam, and it was just another day. We dropped off the tanker in the Gulf of Tonkin and headed inbound. We had probably 16 bombers, F-4 bombers, and probably 2 4-ships of escorts. I was one of the escorts that day. And
you come in from Thailand.
We come in from Korat, Thailand.
Yeah.
And we got in over the target area, and again, it was we expected all the things that happened. SAMs were looking at us, and the GCIs were looking at us, and the SAMs and AAA, and we got into the target area, and the weather was so bad that the bombers couldn't drop their bombs. So as we turned out, we were heading back toward Haiphong, just north of Haiphong, to exit on the Gulf of Tonkin, and as we started to turn out, we looked up and saw 2 MiG-21s at our 10 o'clock high coming down the formation. And we reversed our turn back up to engage the MiGs, and we were just probably seconds away from firing Sidewinder missiles, the heat-seeking missiles, at these 2 MiG-21s, when a third MiG, a MiG-21 that entered the fight, fired an ATOL missile at us that impacted the tail of our plane. Loud explosion, the plane pitched forward and began to cartwheel through the sky. And it just took a couple seconds to realize this plane's dead. And I'm sure Joe and I were both reaching for the handles, the ejection handles at the same time. He reached it first, and my canopy it departs the plane, and the rocket motor ignites, and I'm going up the rail, and I'm watching this plane fall away from me. And I watched the front canopy come off, and I watched Joe's rocket motor ignite. And both of us were free of the plane. And for a moment, there was a real sense of, whew, boy, I'm alive. And then the free fall. We were at 23,000 feet when we ejected. And
the plane was traveling how fast?
About 500 miles an hour. And,
now, back you up for a second. You did not know that this MiG had come up under you and behind you. You didn't see it coming.
No, we didn't see him.
Okay. Did you have any notice at all, or was it just the explosion that took you by surprise?
It was the explosion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
and the cartwheeling through the sky became very obvious.
All right, then your chute opened, and you've got how long till you hit the ground, and what are you thinking about?
Well, it opens up at 10,000 feet. That's a program that way.
That's a long fall.
Yeah, about 13,000 foot free fall, and then 10,000 feet to get to the ground.
Yeah.
And we're going through layer after layer of clouds, and got down to about 6,000 feet before I saw the ground, and I could look in the distance and I can see the city of Hanoi. We were only probably 10 or 15 miles from Hanoi when we were shot down.
Does your life flash before your eyes when because you talk about ejecting from an airplane and you're going 500 miles an hour. It would seem like that moment before you run into a truck, that something, your brain would start to operate in a different way. What is it like when you have that sensation? Are you you're not thinking about what's going to happen to you or what has happened, I wouldn't think.
Now, when we took the hit, it became very obvious very quickly the plane was dead. And your training is what comes to your mind at that point. I mean, your mind just goes into gear. And you start thinking of all the things that you've been trained to do, how to do it, ejecting from the plane, what happens if the seat doesn't work like it's supposed to do at 10,000 feet, how to separate from the seat, how to deploy your parachute. You're looking immediately for what am I going to do when I hit the ground. I can hear planes just all over the sky right now. There are jets flying everywhere. And I kind of worried that I'd be a hood ornament on a plane at the time, because they're flying through clouds and everything. So it was kind of a scary moment. But again, when I reached 6,000 feet and broke out of that last layer of clouds, I could see all the villages scattered around me, and that's when you start thinking, okay, where do I go next? What do I do next? And how do I get away from this? Where do I evade? So it's all the training that comes into your mind.
Yeah.
The training is phenomenal.
And where did you land?
Well, it was not far from a small village, about probably 200 yards from where my plane impacted the ground.
Right. So
I knew there was no surprise that a American pilot was fixing to hit the ground, because the plane was exploding, the 20 mic was kicking off, and the missiles were exploding, and so it was a pretty noisy event down there. And when I hit the ground, it was like I said, it was a couple hundred yards from where the plane was, and I probably moved 200 or 300 yards away from the plane, and found a place to hide under there to start collecting my thoughts and decide where to go.
All right. What were you carrying? Do you have a survival pack of some sort?
Oh yeah, we've got a vest with radios, batteries, Combat Special 38 revolver. I had 2 frozen water bottles in my G-suit pockets. They don't give us you don't put much food in there in your survival gear you carry on your body, but
Did you have a way of telling people that you, or did people, the Air Force, know that your plane had been shot down? Did they know that you were alive at that point?
Well, they knew that we got out of the plane because of the beepers that go off, the emergency beepers that go off. And I made a couple of phone calls on the SAR rescue frequency, but again, at that point, people were pretty busy up there in the sky trying to work through these other MiGs that were there, and probably at that point SAMs were coming up. So I didn't expect to talk to anybody there, but I at least put word out that I was in the chute okay.
And how long after you were on the ground did the villagers capture you?
It was about 3 hours. I evaded for about 3 hours around villages, and I remember when I began to hear gunshots in the distance, and began to hear shouts, and at that point I knew I needed to hide. And of course, around Hanoi there wasn't a lot of places to hide, just some small valleys and tall grass in it. And so I just got into a small valley, pulled the tall grass up around me, and just waited. And it was probably about 10 minutes later I began to see just hundreds of people on the ridge lines around me. And as they got closer and closer, about 30 feet away, one of them saw me die in the grass and pulled his pistol up and started firing at me. And I could feel the bullets whipping past me, but none of them hit me. And then people just swarmed over me and began to beat me. Rifle butts, bamboo, kicking me. And I was about to go unconscious when a couple of the NVA troops came up and pulled people off of me.
Because you had value to them, and they
Absolutely.
knew that. So.
Yeah.
Now, where was the pilot? What happened to him?
He ended up about a half a mile apart from me. he stayed out about 18 hours before they captured him. He was overnight.
Right.
He said that he said he was under some thickets of thorn bushes or some thick bushes, and he was actually about 25 feet from where they had their campfire that night, the people looking for him. And next morning, they just went through all the brush around him, and they finally found his bush, picked him up.
Now, where did they take you after that?
When I was captured, they took me to a small village where it was a makeshift cell they put me in, and throughout the day, they would untie my legs and throw me outside to another group of people to have at me. And spent that night, when it got dark, they took me out back to a concrete bunker where they burned their trash. A little 5-foot square concrete bunker. And tied me up like you'd tie a calf at a rodeo and threw me in there for the night.
I believe I've read that you said that you prayed that night. Was that your way of, and did this process that you started then, did that sustain you through the whole time that you were a prisoner?
Well, it's kind of strange. I was a Christian when I was shot down. As a child, I was a Christian. But when I got to Vietnam, war was every day. I didn't think too much about my Christian life at that point because I was fighting a war every day. And it dawned on me later on when I was my first night in Hanoi. They put into a solitary cell, which was about 10-foot square concrete room with a window on the back of the cell with bars on it, and an iron door on the front of the cell, and a couple of boards on the floor were my bed. There was a small bucket in the corner, that was my bathroom, and there was one single solitary light bulb hanging from a wire dangling from the ceiling. And I remember that night vividly as I laid on the floor of that cold cell, and I was having a pity party because all this stuff was running through my mind, that who knows how many Americans had come through this very cell already. Some of them had already spent 7 or more years up in Hanoi. Mm-hmm. And I really felt like, I could be here a long time. I might spend the rest of my life in this cell. So I got kind of discouraged at that point, and as I was lying on the floor, I began to pray, something I hadn't done in several months. And through my tears and my prayers, God heard me, and He gave me the 23rd Psalm, where it says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for Thou art with me." And God never left me up in Hanoi. He was there with me every step of the way. He guarded me, protected me, provided for me. I'm here today because God took care of me up there.
Diane, I want to ask you, you had a brother.
Yes.
Who was potentially
yes.
going to go. And you're back home and you're young and you're seeing this war on television. Mm-hmm. And you know about POWs. Can you recall anything that what your thoughts were at the time about what was happening to these guys?
Well, my father and uncles, excuse me, were World War II and Korea veterans. And so the military and the pride was instilled in me, and just loving America. So when we went to war with Vietnam, as our family, we were very concerned about our country. And my dad talked a lot about war and what it was doing to these guys, and we were concerned. And so I don't know, I've had other people tell me that they didn't even hardly remember anything about the Vietnam War growing up, but I did, and I think it's because of my parents and and my dad's experiences. But I do know, with my brother being at the Air Force Academy and the concern that we had, that we were talking about it daily. We were keeping up with it daily, and we were praying about it daily. So it was a very important part of our lives.
It's easy to forget how dominant the issues around Vietnam, the war itself, were during that time. Mm-hmm. I mean, they always say, well, it was the first television war. And it's true, because it was there. I mean, I saw something recently during the Tet Offensive. The evening newscast, like 90% of the evening newscast was devoted to Vietnam. So we didn't have CNN, we didn't have MSNBC at the time, but still, for that time, it was the conversation. Cecil, tell me about when you first encountered other American POWs. Where was that, and what was that experience like?
Actually, it was my first night in my solitary cell. I knew there were other prisoners there. We had already been threatened with communicating if we tried to communicate with anybody else. But my idea was, I want to know who's here. And began to think about it. I thought, I just started whistling. I whistled the Tennessee Waltz. The guy next to me whistled the Yellow Rose of Texas. I whistled the Air Force hymn. He whistled the Navy hymn. And I began to realize who this person was next to me. So that was my first communication. We had a lot of different ways to communicate. The tap code. We used the deaf and dumb sign language. We had in the courtyard I was in, there was a wall separating us from another cell block, and we would drop notes in the wall. And so there were all kinds of ways to communicate in the prisons of Hanoi, and we could probably get a message around the entire complex within an hour if we wanted to.
Did you have the opportunity to speak with each other in any sort of normal fashion?
Well, when I was after my solitary confinement, the 3 weeks I spent solitary, I was actually put in with other Americans, and the rest of the war I was actually in a cell with at least two other Americans.
I've read again that, and it surprised me. I didn't realize the extent to which you resisted. You resisted what they were trying to use you for. Can you tell us a little about that? What the North Vietnamese, the propaganda purposes they were trying to use you for?
Well, I was probably one of the youngest guys in my cell block. I was a first lieutenant when I was shot down. I was 24 years old. And I was selected out of my cell block for indoctrination. So they would take me out, take me up to the head shed, and put me in a room with a couple of the North Vietnamese indoctrinators. And they would talk about how great their society was and how our society was falling apart. I remember that they used to bring us some magazines, one of them, Art Buchwald. And of course, everything he said was tongue-in-cheek. And he talked about that the miniskirt and the bikini were going to be the downfall of America. And we knew all this was tongue-in-cheek, but they didn't. They didn't understand that type of literature. So it was kind of hilarious in a way, but some of the things they'd bring us to read, thinking this was going to change us over to be a communist. I remember when, after about the fourth or fifth session, I went back to the guys in my cell block and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And so we started talking. We said, well, what have they been doing? What have they been saying? And so they said, tell you what, why don't you ask them next time they talk about the war and about how we're Yankee air pirates and we're war criminals. Ask them about their brothers in the South. Why are they killing their brothers in the South? If these are their brothers, they keep talking about them in South Vietnam, why are you killing them? And it was amazing when you started bringing things up to them, they didn't know how to answer them. They didn't know how to communicate that way.
Now, they didn't just try to indoctrinate you. They didn't just try to talk you into doing things. They tortured you. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, prior to 1970, there was a lot of torture going on. I think you probably have heard all the things, hanging them from the ceiling by their elbows and dislocating shoulders, and just terrible, terrible things they did to these guys. After 1970, it may have been the letter writing campaign that millions of letters were sent by these school kids and families to Vietnam. And they flooded the mail system in North Vietnam. And they finally began to realize that they're going to answer to the treatment of these Americans at one time. And at that point, I think that's what maybe caused the treatment to change. But, interrogation, I was beaten, I was threatened, they held guns to my head. They didn't put me through the torture that a lot of the guys went through. So I was fortunate there.
There's a new series that's airing on PBS by Ken Burns about the Vietnam War, and a big part of it is about a woman. I wish I could remember her name, but she was the wife of a POW, and she organized a bunch of other family members to try to put more attention on the fate of POWs. And in this series, they give a lot of credit to that effort to try to get people to just talk about it and try to comprehend what's going on over there. And apparently that had some impact on the North Vietnamese because it's, for lack of a better way to put it, they realized that this was bad for them from a public relations standpoint.
Absolutely.
You know, here they are, as you're saying, they're saying that we have this, you know, this advanced society, when in fact they were acting in a very barbaric manner. Did your family know that you were alive? And you were married already at the time?
I was married at the time. I was listed as missing in action.
Yeah.
Very few of the guys' names got out. I think they saw that as a way to hurt America, but just by not acknowledging that they held us as a prisoner. So my wife says, she says, I knew you were alive in my heart. But she didn't find out until, I think, January 29th when the list of prisoners was released.
Mm-hmm. And that was 3 months later.
Yeah.
Or tell us about March. It's March the 29th. Is that the day that you were released?
That was my best day in Hanoi.
If you don't mind, I'd like to know. There's always sort of a kind of an underground information channels, and people kind of know what politicians are doing and what diplomats are doing. Did all of you understand that there were efforts being made to get you home?
We had a couple of prisoners. One was a Thai prisoner. One was a South Vietnamese prisoner up there. And of course, they spoke the language, and they were kind of our intel. We knew long before the peace was signed that this was going on. We knew before we were going to be released that the peace had been signed. In fact, the night that they took us into a big auditorium at the Wallow prison to tell us, I mean, they had TV cameras and microphones everywhere, and they were going to make a big propaganda thing out of it. But we already knew what they were going to do, so we put the word out that when they announced the war's over, we're going to be going home, just sit there stoically, do nothing, say nothing. And boy, did that make them mad. I mean, they were expecting this big hoopla, guys jumping up and yelling and screaming, and we just sat there stone-faced. They didn't like that at all.
I've read, and I think you might have said, that the code of conduct was very important to sustaining you.
Yeah.
Tell us what that means. What the code of conduct is?
Well, it's the way you're supposed to act as an American in a prison situation like that. You know, it's the way they're teaching us how to handle ourselves, how to control ourselves. You know, we're not supposed to give out information that would be detrimental to the cause, to the war. My thought was, I don't want to tell them anything that the guy coming behind me flying his plane over North Vietnam would be put in jeopardy because of. I remember telling them when they asked me about the ALQ-119 jamming pod, I said, I don't know much about it. You turn it on when you pre-flight it, a little white light comes on and says it's working. And they said, is that all you know about it? And I said, what else would I need to know? I said, I turn it on, it works. So, you know, we had to be very careful what we said up there. Staying together as a band of brothers up there was very important. If somebody got discouraged, we had to bring them back. We had to encourage them. We had to be united in everything we did.
And that's cellmates, I assume, and people and the other people in the population.
Yes.
How many people you were in the Hanoi Hilton at one point? How many POWs were there?
It varied depending on the time. I was taken over to the zoo complex. I was in the Hilton for about a month and a half before they moved a large portion of us over to the zoo. And in my cell block, there were 13 Americans. There were probably 150, 160 Americans in that complex. So at some points, the people were moved up to the dog patch and on the Chinese border. So it really depended on the time and what their situation was in North Vietnam.
For people who are watching, and you refer to the Hanoi Hilton, it was not a Hilton.
Oh no,
Just,
anything but a
yeah,
Hilton.
yeah. Tell us what the Hanoi Hilton was.
It was
mean-
actually built, I think, by the Japanese as an infamous place. I mean, 12-foot high concrete walls, concertina wire on top of that. It was formidable. The cells were very meager. Again, concrete wall rooms, boards on the floor. After solitary, my bed actually became 2 or 3 boards on concrete blocks getting me off the floor. That was the only change in the cell. So it was pretty intimidating.
Now, you talk about supporting each other, and again, that's a very interesting part of the time that I've read about. What was your hardest point? What was the toughest, lowest moment for you, and how did you survive it?
Well, I was fortunate. I had some great guys in the cells with me. I guess the hardest part was just when a holiday would come up, and we always said, we'll be home by Christmas. We'll be home by July the 4th. We'll be home by... You kept that going, but when it didn't happen, it was discouraging. But December 19th, 72, when the B-52s started coming up north dropping bombs, we knew things were really serious now. Things were going to happen because that had never happened before. The devastation that Hanoi was receiving was phenomenal. Whole sections of the city were just destroyed.
And you could hear all of this.
Oh, yeah. I was in the middle of the city. I could feel it. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of 500-pound bombs dropping all around us. And the ground was heaving as if an earthquake. The noise was deafening. Bombs were coming down. SAMs and AAA were going up. It was scary. But in the same note, we were glad they were doing it because we could see an end in sight.
So it wasn't about 3 months later that you finally, the POWs, or at least a large part of the POW population, you were released. Tell us about when you were actually released. How did it come to pass, and what was that day like for you, and what was it like getting on that plane flying out?
Well, I think everybody saw us come home in these really nice little outfits, a little sport shirt and sport pants and a little sport jacket with a little sport bag with Habak toothpaste in it. Haven't used Habak toothpaste ever again. But they dressed us up really nice, a little black belt and pointed black shoes. And so they had already, we knew that the peace agreement had been signed. We were waiting for our release. And I always wondered, how am I going to know we're going home today? And I was sitting in my cell one day looking out through the bars, and I saw this guy in a white suit walk by. And I looked at him, and it was Walter Cronkite. Wow. And I thought, guys, we're going home today. And sure enough, they brought our clothes out to us and took us on a bus out to Guillaume Airfield. And I saw the C-141 land with a big red cross on the tail. And they took us out to the airfield, and they had a ceremony set up. A lot of Vietnamese dignitaries and a lot of American dignitaries.
So they're treating you better by this point.
Well, actually, yeah, they were trying to fatten us up, I think. We were actually getting some little canned Russian meat, like a little tuna can, roast beef and stuff like that. 3 of us would share a little small can, though, so it wasn't like we were going to gain a lot of weight. But things improved a little bit after the peace was signed. But when we got to the airport, they lined us up in ranks, and they called our names, and we marched forward and saluted this U.S. Air Force colonel who saluted returned our salute and shook our hand and said, "Welcome home, son." And then they escorted us to the plane that was waiting. And I remember as I turned to walk up the ramp of that plane, and my eyes fell upon a field of red, white, and blue inside that plane. And as I stood there with my tears in my eyes and lump in my throat and butterflies in my stomach, I knew I was coming home to my America. America is the best thing ever. You know, I've been to a lot of countries. It's always great to come home. Mm-hmm. But that day, I'd lost everything. I'd lost every freedom I had, and that day I gained it back. It was great to come home.
I've read that you said you don't know what you have until you've lost it.
And that's true.
Yeah.
People who have everything and they don't think about it, it's hard for them to realize what it is to lose it all. But the guys who sat in that prison camp lost everything.
And a lot of families.
And a lot of families
lost
did.
everything.
That's true.
What were you thinking? Again, you're young and at home, and all of this is going on in the world, and it sounds like because of your family history with the military and your brother's involvement, that you're very tuned in to what is going on. What you remember? What your thoughts were?
Well, and I also had some first cousins that were actually fighting in Vietnam too, so that made a difference. Well, I was 15 when the POWs came home, so I remember we were there as a family, and it's hard, I almost get emotional even thinking about it now, that we were there as a family watching on TV these guys coming off the airplanes and returning home, and how much it meant to our family that we had prayed and we had watched this play out, and then where we are sitting and just watching the answers to our prayers right there before us. And it was very emotional. I know my mom and I were crying. I don't know if my dad did, but I know that we did, and it meant a lot to us, and I'll never forget it, ever.
What were your thoughts when you first got to the States, when you first touched down on American soil? Oh, happy day. I tell you, it was great to see the family again, see my wife, mom and dad, my brothers. It was an awesome time. You know, I dreamed about coming home and what it was going to be like, and even my fondest dreams, I couldn't imagine what it was going to be like what actually happened when we got home. Yeah. But everybody treated us great. Of course, the POWs coming home was different than a normal guy who came home at the end of his tour. Right. We were received with open arms. A lot of the Vietnam vets were not received that way, right. And that's tragic in America that we don't treasure the men and women who fight the wars for us. And I think that's the one thing that bothered me the most about coming home, was the fact that so many of these guys came home and they weren't seen as heroes. But I think we were seen as heroes because they saw our coming home as the end of the war. And it was a great time of patriotism in our country. American flags were flying everywhere. We were treated great. I remember going to the White House for that huge dinner reception we had at the White House. It was awesome. Everybody should go. You know, have a dinner at the White House. Yeah. But it was an amazing time to come home and feel the love of America once again. Yeah. How long did it take you to figure out what you were just talking about a second ago about the other veterans, about the other people who had served in Vietnam and the way that they were received? Well, I'd already seen it. You know, it was 1970 before I graduated from college, and 72 before I went to Vietnam. And I had watched a lot of these guys coming home already. I'd seen a lot of the protest, and I knew the pain that America was feeling. So I understood that. I didn't appreciate it, I guess. It didn't change my thoughts about being in the service, about being in the Air Force, or about serving. I think that patriotism is loving your country and being willing to serve. And being prepared for it. Yeah. What was, if it's possible to say, what's the residual effect of, or how did being a prisoner of war change your life? I think if someone met you standing in line at the bank, they'd probably say, and someone said, well, that guy was a POW, they'd be, that's very hard for me to believe, because you seem so relaxed and confident and happy, and you seem to be just fine. Is there any residual effect from having been a POW for you? Yeah, I think so. I think I came back with a better understanding of who I am, my God. I think when you're in a situation like that, you've got to reach deep inside of yourself to know who you really are and what you can handle. And I think that's something maybe a lot of people don't have to come to grips with, like a lot of us who served in the prison camps of Hanoi. But Yeah, I think I'm a better person from having gone through that and having survived it.
I want to talk to both of you about what you were just talking about a minute ago, because, and that is how Vietnam veterans in general were received and are received all these years later and when they first came back, because that really is the foundation. That's why we're doing this show, is that we felt that it's time to talk if we're ever going to talk, because I think a lot of people out there, our age and younger, particularly younger, don't know anything about Vietnam. Certainly don't know your experiences. They don't know the experiences of people who were in the infantry or in the Navy, and I'd like to put it on the record, what people went through. But what's your experience talking with Vietnam veterans about their reception and how they feel about what they did?
Well, for us, we have taken quite a few Vietnam vets with their World War II fathers going on trips of honor. And we saw immediately the deep hurt in our Vietnam vets. And so even though the sons were going with their dads, to support them and enjoy this trip with them to be honored, we would see that there would be as much or even more healing in their sons on one of our trips. And they would say things like, well, when I came home and I was in my uniform and I was trying to get a taxi to go home, the driver would not take me home. He refused to let me get into the cab. That's very heartbreaking. We have a lot of stories like that. When we go on a trip of honor and we'll go, let's say we're in Washington, D.C., and we'll go see the memorials and monuments, at night we will have a room, a hospitality room, where the guys just sit around. I've had a lot of family members say, my dad, and I'm talking about Vietnam veterans too, my father has never talked about the war. But then on this trip, that's all he did was talk. I've learned so much about my father during this week. And so that's the power of taking veterans on a trip together, where you're away from home and you have time together, time for them to share. When we go to Washington, D.C., we're there for 5 days. And we just take the trip at a slow pace and just give them an opportunity to absorb everything and then share their experiences at night. So we had one Vietnam veteran's son that had gone with his dad, and he shared that when he got off the airplane in California, someone threw red paint on him and called him a baby killer or whatever, and he was deeply wounded by that. I mean, he was so hurt the way he was treated when he came back, and that is one of the things that it really motivates me to be able to give back to these men and to help them heal.
Healing is a word that gets used a lot. Is it too late for those veterans? Is it too late for them to feel a real sense of healing and welcoming?
It's not too late, because I want to tell you what we've seen and with our World War II veterans, and we've done a lot of trips with them. It's the same with the Vietnam veterans, because here's what we've experienced. These men, and I'm talking about the World War II guys, so it's the same. They're sitting at home now. Now, they came back from the war and they pushed it all down. What did they do? They went to make their families great, their community great, America great. Now, they are sitting at home. They are retired. They're alone. Their wives have passed away. Their children are busy. For the first time in their lives, their minds are going back to the war. Men that have never had nightmares are now having nightmares. World War II veterans that have never drank are drinking because they never dealt with it. And so we are seeing the exact same thing with our Vietnam veterans. They may have done okay, they had a great career. Now at this time of their lives, as they're starting to age, the cracks are beginning to show.
Yes.
And that is why we want to bring healing to these men. And I know, you mentioned that people say that word, but you know what heals these men, in my opinion, is remembering them. Taking them on a trip, like we also take Vietnam veterans to Hawaii on a trip of honor, because many of them had R&R there, and their wives would meet them there, or they passed through Hawaii, and it's a special place for them. So we have taken quite a few Vietnam veterans to Hawaii and to Washington, D.C., and they will say to me, "Thank you for caring about us," because we've never felt cared for. And we took a Navy SEAL from Vietnam on our last Hawaii trip, and he said to me, and he's had issues, he said, "I received more healing on this trip than all the years of therapy." And I said, "How can that be?" And he goes, "Because you guys really care about us, and you just listen." And I think love heals.
I want to mention again the name of this organization. It's Forever Young Senior Veterans. And I attended a meeting recently, and it's where I met Mr. Brunson. And it was strong stuff. The room full of men who are all proud of what they've done and proud of each other. And to see fathers and sons, I mean, they weren't literally fathers and sons, there may have been a few, but to see fathers and sons having the same shared experiences, and to know that they're surrounded by people who care about them. I hadn't even thought about the being alone part, and you're right. I mean, even people my age, and Cecil and I are roughly the same age, you get isolated. And you've got to be careful, and you've got to have whatever support you can get from wherever you can get it. And your organization is doing wonderful things. You were nodding your head through a lot of the things that she said. Tell me what you were thinking about.
I think what comes to my mind is that the thing that I see in these guys is when people acknowledge them. These Vietnam vets went through pure hell over there, and so few Americans really understand the plight of these men, what they endured over there, walking through the jungles on these missions, the booby traps that they went in, the holes they went down in, the caves they went into. These were terrible times for these men and women, and I would love to see America appreciate what they endured over there for America. We can fight wars over there, or we can fight on American soil. We need to make up our mind. But we need to acknowledge the men and women of our armed forces who daily deal with the situations that they deal with in these foreign countries, in Afghanistan, in Iraq right now, and Korea. They're everywhere, all over the world. We have men and women stationed all over the world. And even if they're not in a combat zone, a lot of these places, they could be in a combat again. And they live under the threat of that daily. Our men and women in Korea right now live under the threat of an attack. Mm-hmm. So it's tough.
It struck me in Vietnam when Vietnam was the last war, I believe, I'm certain of this, that in which people were drafted to serve. But since that time, our wars have not been fought by all Americans. I think there are a lot of people who are very connected to, and who have family members in the service, or who know people who are in the service, or who are involved in organizations like yours. But there are a lot of other Americans who are not connected to sacrifice. Do you think that seems to me to be a problem with our sort of willingness to wade into things when we don't necessarily have a way out politically? Do you think Americans really understand what the sacrifice is? Do you think people say that they do? We put bumper stickers on our cars and we wave the flags in football games, but do we really understand what those troops are giving?
They haven't walked in their shoes, and that's the problem. Mm-hmm. They live in a very secure environment. Yes, we are under threat of terrorism and all that, but they live in a very secure environment here, and they don't think about the men and women who risk their lives daily for our safety here in the United States. So yeah, it's a problem.
Should we have some form of national service that requires you to either serve in the military or serve your country in some way?
I think it would help our young people. I think many of them do not have much direction today. I do think it would help.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it'd be a good idea, to tell you the truth. I know a lot of countries do that. They serve a couple years, and I think it helps them to understand what people go through who stay in the service. A lot of these people would probably stay in the service. But those who don't, at least they have an understanding of the sacrifices that are being made by the Americans in the service today and those who have served.
Exactly, because freedom is not free.
No. Tell me what each of you would like people watching this show to know about Vietnam veterans. What would you like people to understand about them from your day-to-day contact with them? And I know, Cecil, I know you talk to people all the time because I know that people talk to you.
Well, I think that they need to understand they're people just like us. They're day-to-day people. They're out there delivering your mail. They're out there serving as policemen, as first responders. They're serving America, and you can serve in a whole lot of different ways. The men and women who served in Vietnam were a special breed, and I think we need to understand that we owe something to them. We owe them the loyalty, the pride in them, the understanding that what they went through was probably very horrible, and they came back with wounds, maybe not physical wounds, but emotional wounds. Many came back with physical wounds, obviously, but even somebody who just is walking down the street, some of these men and women have emotional wounds that your organization tries to heal. And bringing these people together and making them understand that there are people out here who care about you, who care about what you've done, who honor you for what you've done. And it means a lot to these guys.
And there is help out there. You have to ask for it. And start by coming to one of our monthly meetings. We do have World War II, Korean, and Vietnam veterans there, but we are getting a lot of Vietnam vets, and there is a comfort just being together.
Yes.
I want to thank both of our guests today on this. This is our first show. We'll put some information on the screen if you are a Vietnam veteran yourself, or if you know a Vietnam veteran who would like to talk with us about being a guest on this show. I'd like to thank all of the organizations that we've been in contact with who've helped us, people at the Vet Center, the people at the Veterans Hospital here in Memphis, Veterans Medical Center, the Alpha and Omega Veteran Services Program, Diane's wonderful organization. And I want to thank Willie Bearden and Willie Watson, who helped in the production of this show. We will be on the air for as long as we've got stories to tell, and we hope that's a long time. Again, thank you so much for being with us today.